everyone, I'm Brea, and today we're going to be going over 10 of my 5-star predictions for the rest of the year. So we are more than halfway through 2023, and I've had a bit of a rocky reading year. And so I wanted to do this video just so that I could try to keep myself accountable of books that I need to read for the rest of the year, because I'm definitely one of those people that sometimes if I don't put things out into the ether, then I'm not going to do it. And so the first couple of books that I think I'm going to give 5 stars are solely based on because I've read from these authors before and I gave them high ratings. So first up is Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. And so Elizabeth Acevedo is one of my favorite authors of all time. Every single book I've read by her, I've given 5 stars. And this book is a little different just because most of her past books have been YA, and this is her first adult novel. And this just follows Fleur, and she has a gift where she can predict where she knows the day that people will die. So when she decides that she wants to do this living wake, her family starts to get a little anxious because it's like, is she about to die? Someone else in the family about to die? And so this book follows like the 3 days leading up to the wake and how like some family secrets come out, and we get to learn more about like the family dynamics. And Elizabeth Acevedo is just such a special writer, so I knew that when I was making this list that this had to be at the very top. And this book does come out in August, but I do want to try and read it before it actually comes out so I can give everybody my thoughts. But I'm super excited for this one. And then we have The Only One Left by Riley Sager. And so I feel like Riley Sager is a hit or miss author for a lot of people, me included, but I feel like a lot of his books I have enjoyed. Whether or not I've given them 5 stars or not is a different story. But The Only One Left follows this lady who, she's an old age now, but when she was younger, she was kind of accused of killing her entire family. And so now she has a caregiver coming into her home, and she's wanting to kind of spill the beans a little bit about like what actually happened to her family and if she was involved and all of that. And so it is kind of like a soul survivor story almost. And one of my favorite books by Riley Sager is Final Girls, and that definitely plays into like the soul survivor trope. However, this is a little different. So I'm really excited to get into this one. I feel like I've heard decent things about it so far, and yeah, I don't know, I'm just a little nervous because Riley Sager, he's been disappointing me a little bit, but we'll see. Then there's All Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby, and I gave Razorblade Tears 5 stars last year, and it was on my top 10 books of the year list. I really enjoyed it, but it was my first time reading from S.A. Cosby, and I haven't read from him since. But All Sinners Bleed follows a detective who is trying to investigate a serial killer, and so I like detective stories in general. So the fact that S.A. Cosby has written one just really put this at the top of my list. And I've heard one person read it and they gave it 5 stars. And so I'm really interested to get into this one to see if it's as fast-paced as Razorblade Tears, or if there's the same type of dialogue, which I really enjoyed in Razorblade Tears. And so this will be only my second time reading from S.A. Cosby. And so I'm hoping that, you know, this book just leads me into almost having a new favorite author of all time, but we shall see. And then another book that was on my top 10 books of last year was The Push by Ashley Aldrain, and that was a debut of hers, I believe. And so she recently came out with a book called The Whispers, and The Whispers is about a young boy who falls out of a window, and this book takes place in a span of a week's time, and it follows 4 families, including the family of the boy who gets out of the window. I keep wanting to say pushed, but I don't know if he's actually pushed or if he just falls. And it follows that family along with 3 other families that are in the neighborhood and are connected to this family. And it's multi-POV, and all the POVs are of the moms of these families. And so I feel like Ashley Aldrain's work, I think for some people it can be hit or miss, especially I think if you're a parent. I'm not a parent, and so I really enjoy her work and I really enjoy her writing, but I know that it can be a little divisive. So I'm interested to see if I continue to like her works, if The Push was maybe just like a one-hit wonder for me. But because I did enjoy The Push so much, I definitely want to give this a go. And the next book on this list is also from an author that I've read from before, which is Danielle Clayton. And I've only read from her once, and I actually ended up giving the book 4 stars, which was The Bells, but I still really enjoyed like the world building and like the premise of the book. I just think it probably wasn't 5 stars for me because it was YA. And so I'm a little confused even at myself of why I think this is going to be 5 stars, because this next book is The Marvelers, which is actually a middle grade book. But it follows an international magic school. And so magic schools really are my jam. And I have enjoyed middle grade before. So I'm thinking that because it's a magic school and because it's middle grade, my expectations are just a little different than how I went into The Bells. And so I think I'll really enjoy this one. And I have this as an ebook, so hopefully I can get to it by the end of the year. And so the next few books on my list aren't necessarily new releases. Some of them have been books that have been published eons ago. Some of them have been books that have just been sitting on my TBR forever. And other ones, it's kind of a hodgepodge, okay? But next up we have 13 by Stephen Kavanaugh. And so I've recently been traveling a lot, and now when I travel, I try to pick up a book by an author that is from the place that I'm traveling to. And 13 had actually been on like my Goodreads TBR for probably about a year and a half. And I had no idea that Steve Kavanaugh was an Irish author. So when I was in Ireland and I saw this book sitting on the Irish author's table, I was like, thank you very much. You're coming home with me. 13 is about a serial killer who is on a jury for a murder trial. And literally that's all I needed to know, because I love serial killer books, just trying to figure out like the psyche and stuff. And so the fact that they're on a jury for a murder trial, I'm just like, where's this actually gonna go? And so I'm super excited about this one as well. And I'm probably going to keep saying that I'm super excited about these, but of course I'm excited about them if I think I'm going to give them 5 stars. So I just need to stop saying that. And then up next is a book that I haven't heard that many people talk about, but it sounds like it's right up my alley, and that is The Apollo Murders by Chris Hadfield. And so essentially this book is just a thriller set in space. It's where NASA astronauts and these Russian astronauts are kind of like in this space race, but then when a deadly accident happens, there's a whole bunch of secrets that kind of come from NASA and like the Russian astronauts. And Chris Hadfield is an actual astronaut. And so I'm interested to see if this book is going to be maybe too science-y, or if it's going to be just the right amount of detail where we feel like we're actually in space. But you know, space is my jam, thrillers are my jam, so a thriller in space sounds like it's gonna hit, you know. It is kind of long, which is making me a little nervous again about it maybe being too science forward, but literally this is a book that I have heard no one talk about, and so I'm happy that I'm kind of going into it with no expectations, but we'll see. Then we have reading is fundamental. Look at the book title first. Then we have Exhalation by Ted Chiang, and this book I have just been sitting on my TBR. It's moved around my apartment. It used to sit on like my bedside table. It used to sit in my TBR cart. It used to sit on the shelf. Me thinking that if I moved it around and I'd see it more often, I would finally read it. But here we are. So I'm hoping that putting in this video actually makes me want to read it. But this is a short story collection, and it is science fiction. And this literally just says, it tackles some of humanity's oldest questions along with new quandaries only he could imagine. These stories will change the way you think, feel, and see the world. And you know, I feel like I've had a lot of revelations this year, and you know, we might as well just keep it going with this book. I just hope that it doesn't give me like an existential crisis. But apparently a lot of the short stories in this book have won like multiple awards and things, so I have really high expectations for this one. And so one of my favorite series of all time is The Hunger Games, but we all know that there is an OG Hunger Games, and that is Battle Royale. And so I'm not gonna lie. When I first got this book, I thought it was a manga. And then I opened it up and guess what? It's real words. It's real words, and it's a lot of them in here. So while I wasn't necessarily expecting that, I'm still excited to read it just because it is literally the OG Hunger Games. I have heard that this might be like a little bit more gory and bloody, which I can't necessarily watch on TV, but I'm okay with like blood and gore in books. And so I'm a little intimidated by the size, but I just feel like if I love the Hunger Games so much, I have to do this book justice and give it a read, just because it's the OG. You just got to do it. So the last book on this list is The Name of the Wind, and this was actually recommended to me by a coworker who has a lot of similar like science fiction and fantasy taste to me, and I've recommended him a lot of books that he's enjoyed and he's actually read, and he's recommended a couple of things to me and I have not picked a single one of them up. So I figured I'd actually give one of his recommendations a go, and so he said if I start with any of his recommendations, it should be The Name of the Wind. He said this is like an adult Harry Potter, but a little less problematic. I'm a little nervous again because I'm afraid of thick books, and it's just because I'm afraid I'm gonna waste my time. Like I'm gonna be 400 pages in and be like, I don't want to continue on, you know, but I'm gonna trust his judgment on this one. And I heard that there's like a whole like fandom for The Name of the Wind, and I know that this follows like a wizard and it's essentially like a hero's journey story arc. So that's really all I know going into it, and I think that's probably all I should know going into it, just so that I can actually try to get through the entire 600 plus pages of this book. And so while that completes my list, I do want to talk about two other books because I had originally made this list maybe like a month ago, but I've actually read two books that I originally put on my list. And it actually makes me a little nervous for the rest of these. So the first book that I've already read that I originally had on this list was Notes on an Execution. And I had heard so many good things about this book. It was about this serial killer who was in jail, and we get his POV while he's in jail, but we also get the POV of a few women in his life. And while this wasn't a typical thriller in my opinion, you know, there wasn't things like popping out and, you know, you weren't really at the edge of your seat for anything, it definitely had some things that made you think and that are a little scary. And so I would warn people to maybe look into this book a little bit more if you have very strong feelings on like the death penalty one way or the other. But I ended up giving this book like 4 stars, 4.5. So definitely not a bad rating by any means, but it wasn't a 5-star. Then the second book that I had on this list that I read was The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I'm glad that it's now not on the list anymore. This book was just so mediocre to me, and I thought I was gonna like it because after reading Final Girls by Riley Sager, I really got interested in like the soul survivor trope. And since this is essentially that, it's like about a whole group of women who are final girls and someone is starting to kill them off one by one. And you know, that's really the premise of that. Really should have been 5 stars for me, but the execution just didn't land. I just don't know if it's because I couldn't really connect with the main character, because I didn't know if she was a reliable narrator or not. But yeah, everything kind of just fell pretty flat for me at the end. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. This is really the one that makes me nervous for the other books, because it's like, do I know myself? Can I trust my own judgment? Or like, are some of these books and authors gonna let me down? The only way for me to know is to read the book. So there we are. But let me know down below in the comments a book that you've given 5 stars this year, just in case some of these don't pan out for me and I need like a redemption of some sort. And if you made it to the end of this video, leave a star emoji for 5 stars. And you are my absolute favorite, my little tater tot, and I hope you have a good week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.